Hi everyone, this is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast. I want to talk to you today about investments, and this is for particularly into the UK. I'm not sure exactly what other countries will have and the similarities or the differences they'll have, but I'm talking about the UK in 2019. If you're not in the UK, maybe it'll give you some inspiration and some ideas about what you could do in your country. If not, if you are in the UK, hopefully some of this will be very relevant to you. So I'm going to talk about 4 different areas of investments, and then they're broken down into different points within each category. So I'm going to talk about pensions. I'm going to talk about ISAs. I'm going to talk about property. And I'm going to talk about the last one, which I think most people would forget, is investing in yourself. Okay, some of the things we've covered before about investing in yourself, but I think it's important just to recap on those things because they are critical for your future growth. Okay, so first thing is about pensions. So in the UK, there are 2 different types of pensions. There is a state pension and then there's a personal pension. So first of all, the state pension. So this is something that goes all the way back to the 1950s with the state pension being included. This used to be you used to invest in this on your salary, and you would pay into what you guys call in other countries social security. In the UK, we call it national insurance, and this is your state pension that you pay into. Previously, this used to be substantial or worth more than it is now, let's say, because people used to retire and live on that pension. The realities of lack of investment and lack of actually just desire from the electorate and the people in the UK to actually have that being meaningful. People don't in the UK in recent times want to pay in and pay taxes to pay for their state pension. They would prefer to have it fairly low levels. So what you find now is the state pension to get your pension is now 67. The likelihood is with the way people are working that could go up to 70, maybe higher. Be a bit weird if it was probably higher than 70, but the reality is if you don't have any other investments, it's going to be a struggle to be able to retire on your state pension. So you do need to pay. It's worthwhile paying into, but I wouldn't put that as a reliance on being able to be the only thing that you're going to be able to retire on. There are people that I know that are coming up to state pension age and they're going to have to continue working because the state pension is not enough for them to be able to exist or retire on. So yeah, it's the reality of this world is that although useful and definitely worth paying into because you're contributing to it and it's a requirement to contribute to it if you're working, I wouldn't over rely on it. And then sort of personal pensions sort of split into 2. So I work for a corporate, as you're well aware if you listen to this podcast on a regular basis. As a corporate, I contribute into a pension provided by my company, and that is contributed by myself, which is an amount which is generally between 4 and 6%. And that is matched by the employer as well. So that actually, so let's go back a generation. So baby boomers, people used to pay into a company pension, and they used to be very, very well off. So my grandfather had a state pension, had a company pension, and was very well rewarded for the type of pension that he had. It was based on number of years, and he worked in the same company for a very long time, and this meant that his retirement financially was very sound and very sure. He knew what he was bringing in from his state and his sort of company pension. And because it was on the number of years that he'd worked there, he ended up with a very, very beneficial reward for his pension. What's happened in the next generation? So when I started paying my pension at about 28 years old, 27, 27, I think it was, there was none of that end of full pension on the number of years you worked there. It had all of the investment, all of the pensions had turned into investments. So that meant that you had a pension pot, and you invested that as a group in your pension into stocks and shares. You can do a high, medium, or low on your investment, but essentially your company pension is based on the stock market and what people invest in. So there is more fluidity and potential downside of that. And that's why if I was given an option of an old school pension or an investment pension, I would always go for the old school pension. But that's not an option in modern times. The good thing is that I'm going to spend, if I keep on in corporate environments, spend up to about 35 years investing into that. So there is decent money that can be made out of that pension. Equally, if I did something else, the sort of other option, if you're not a corporate employee, is to have a personal pension. Now that is slightly different, and the only real difference is it's still invested in the stock exchange in the way that your corporate pension is, but you don't have a contribution from anyone else. So that's why working for a corporate and having a pension with them is really helpful, because you get basically double the investment with the company matching it. If you had a private pension only, you would only be investing in what you are putting in. So for me, this will be very useful for my long-term retirement, because I will have invested quite a lot of money, and there will be compounding in there. We're going to talk about compounding a little bit later on the ISAs, but essentially the theory of compound, which I'll cover now actually, is that you just put it away and just ignore it and forget about it, and it compounds, it increases every year on year. You invest what you've made into it. So the rule of compound is very important for investments, for long-term investments, things like pension pots. So very important, very useful, and I would definitely say if you were ever given the opportunity, if you were working that sort of environment, I would jump at it, just basically because they're matching your investments and you're doubling your investments into it. So very, very helpful. So the second point is to do with ISAs. So this again I don't know if this is something that overseas countries have, but an ISA is basically a tax-free way of saving. So we went into we had previously, this was set up in about 2005, 6, something like that, by Gordon Brown. He created a way of being able to save money, because the savings, like old school savings accounts, was what people used to use. Basically, you would be impacted by interest rates, and it basically meant you weren't making a lot of money out of it. So Gordon Brown, who was a Labour Chancellor and then followed on to be Prime Minister as well in the noughties, he set up this ISAs. So there's two types of ISAs. There is a savings ISA, which is like an old school savings account, but it's tax free. I know people that put that money into that and they see the advantage of tax free. The advantage of having the second type, which is your stocks and shares ISA, is that you're actually getting investment into the stocks and shares, so you can get dividends, you can get recoup extra money from the stock exchange performing well. So the whole Warren Buffett idea that you regularly pay into your shares, and then forget about them, ignore them, let them compound themselves, invest your any profits straight back into your shares, and the idea is that you will have compounding. Now the important thing, I think the most important thing about the stocks and shares ISAs are that you actually regularly put money into them. So there's two ways you can do that: by fixed sums, or you can do that equally by regular payments. It depends on what type of work you do, and how your income comes into your account. Whether you are doing deals and regular payments are difficult, and actually it would be more useful to every 6 months a deal goes through, or whatever period you do a deal and you then put some money in there. So for me, for a number of years, I would put my bonus straight into my ISA as a lump sum. I've also at times had regular payments into my ISAs as well. As I am an employee with income coming in, I would say it's probably easier to do the regular payments, but it is important to regularly put money in there, because the theory of compounding only really helps when you actually constantly put money into it. So I would say it's important to do that. I would always recommend that you do it in the stocks and shares ISA, but equally there are a lot of people who are a bit conservative or a bit worried about putting their money into stocks and shares, don't trust them, and don't trust that if invested rightly, you will make money out of stocks and shares. I know a number of people who have made a lot of money on long-term investments. You could do short selling, but this type of pension or ISAs is all about long term, and long term success is regularly pay into, invest your dividends back into your ISA, and try not to take money out of it. The critical thing is you don't take money out of it. This is a long-term investment. This is for your future, for your retirement. It's not something that you should be messing about with and taking money out of, and that is one of the biggest problems. People need things, or they perceive they need things, and therefore they take money out, and that's really not going to help your long-term retirement if you're taking money out of your ISAs on a regular basis. So I would say put money in regularly. Just ignore it. Maybe check it every couple of months just to keep an eye on it. 2 or 3 months. I think I'd check it quarterly, 3 months, just to see what it's doing. I wouldn't advise this, but regularly, but I actually recently changed my stocks and shares ISA to another company. I wasn't happy over a 2 or 3 year period that they'd actually been successful. That was my perception. Looking at the numbers, I've actually tracked them as well, and I've now got a spreadsheet that's going to track them more accurately than what I was doing before. I think it's important that you do track it, and as I say, I changed mine. It was a slightly different type of investment. So there are so many. There's so many types. There's high risk, low risk, medium risk. There's contrarian investors. There's people that just invest in the UK, in global. So I would say I've actually got 2 ISAs. One is a global fund, and one is a UK fund. So that's diversifying and making sure that I'm not putting all my eggs into one basket. In the UK, Brexit is happening, or there's lots of things happening at the moment about Brexit, and so there's a lot of uncertainty in the UK. Long term, I think it will be okay. I think we will work our way through Brexit and get to a point. It might take 10 years to get the right level of investment and the right level of trade deals, etc. But I won't go too far into that. But essentially, I would say diversify, be able to cover UK and maybe global, or if you've got a particular country or region that you particularly want to invest in, there are so many different options that you could have. You could have emerging markets. You could, if you like Singapore, or somewhere a little bit more volatile, like maybe Thailand. There are so many different options for you. So make your choice wisely. Maybe when you're younger, you might want to take things slightly high risk. When you're in your 50s, maybe less so. Maybe then you'll probably be putting more money in. Hopefully the kids are growing up and you get into your 50s or whatever, and you can put more money into your investments and into your retirement fund. So that's what I would say about ISAs. The third one I want to talk to you about is property. So there's sort of mixed views on property in the UK. I think there is money to be made out of property. I think the basics that you need to think about, if you've got a deposit or got enough for a deposit outside of your actual investment that you live in. So if you're fortunate enough to not be renting and own your own house, then you would have put a deposit down and be paying a mortgage on that. I'm talking more about property investments. So whether let's just exclude your living residence, the place you're living at the moment, and think about property as an investment. So if you are able to get a deposit to be able to invest in another property, or you inherit it perhaps, excuse me, you should really be thinking about doing a very, very simple. There's so many layers or this or types of properties that you buy. You might want to buy a particular type, a flat, an apartment, a studio flat, a house, whatever it is you might want to. There are options to buy, do up and sell. I would say that's slightly short-sighted unless you're dealing bigger properties where there's bigger profits to be made. I would say if you're thinking of investing in property, you should try and buy with a discount as much as possible, and then refurb it, make it up to speed, and then rent it out. Now, this is something which I'm exploring a little bit myself at the moment, so I maybe talk about this a bit in more detail at a later stage, but I think the basic idea is that you can start getting rental incomes which are long-term investments. So at the minimum, you could pay off your mortgage of your second property and then have the whole property when you're older. There are some other ways of being able to extract by remortgaging and taking money out that way. So I think it's definitely something long-term. Again, I think long-term investments on all of these, really, your pension, your ISAs and your property, as long as you do it long-term and you reinvest wherever you can, and don't take too much of the income that comes from that out, and you reinvest it, then there's definitely long-term money to be made. So I would say definitely think about that. So property is a definitely, the biggest problem is getting that deposit, and if you've got that in the UK, it's about 20%. It used to be 100% mortgages not that long ago, probably about 10 years ago, before the 08-09 depression. So I would say that you need to get that deposit if you can. There are different avenues of getting deposits. It used to be banks would be the primary place. Now there are JVs you could have with partners. If you went to property meetups and started speaking to people, there's definitely options. There are people out in this world that have money and don't know what to invest it in, so you could talk them into investing in you in property, and you have the responsibility if you've got the time to do it, and they just invest in their money. So there's definitely scope of being able to invest in property, but it's slightly changed now. The whole ethos of getting, or sometimes not even getting a deposit, and buying a place, doing it up, and then renting it out with that deposit issue is a lot more tricky. So I would say be careful of that. Make sure you get the deposit. Make sure you, whether that's from a JV partner, whether there's various types of loans you can get, even seed funding and things like that you can get in property, I would imagine. So I think if that, do your research, do more research, because that's not an easy sell, but I would say it's definitely an option that you should consider. And so the fourth thing is investing in yourself. So I would say there are various different ways, and this shouldn't be underrated. Investing in yourself is something that you grow long term, a better businessman, person, father. Depends on what you want to invest in yourself for, whether it is you want to be a better businessman in property or in stocks and shares or whatever it is. Then there's different options that you can do. There's books. You can sit down and read a book. There are audiobooks. Audiobooks are really good. They're probably a little bit underrated, but I would say I really enjoy listening to audiobooks. There's podcasts. So it's along the same sort of line, but you might get a podcast from a Tim Ferriss, a Tony Robbins, a Gary Vee. They're the sort of US people, and they invest. It's all about investing in themselves. So check out audiobooks. Audible is very, very good for me. I like it a lot. Gives you you pay an amount every month, £7.99 I think it is, UK pounds, and you get one book, any cost of that book. Part of your deal. So really, really good. I really like that. A podcast. So you can go into the podcast world. There's mentors. So going out and finding a mentor in the particular area, whether that's a career, whether it's a business, whether it's a property, whatever it is, go out there and find a mentor. There's various ways of being able to do that. Sometimes word of mouth, sometimes meetups. So there's definitely ways of being able to get that mentor. YouTube. I think there's lots of, like, even this might inspire you to do something. So this podcast and this YouTube video, you might be inspired to invest in yourself. There are courses that is sometimes funded by your company, sometimes that's funded by you. There are lots of ways you can do courses in property, in self-development, in being the best you. And then there's learning on the job. So all these things, learning on the job is probably something that people don't necessarily think of initially, but it's really a good skill to try and learn from your experience and learn something new, bring skills and experience forward to other jobs, to other careers, other positions, whatever it is. So really, really, really important that you do that, and you put that investment in. So that's the end of the podcast. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm just going to say a couple of things. So check me out on Twitter, Instagram, very active on both of those at the moment. YouTube channel. There's all these podcasts that I'm now recording live. There is also some of my earlier stuff, which are just quick snippets of ideas, thoughts, ideas, and comments that I have. So do check them out. So there are the places where you can find me. Equally, the first person. So it's a bit of a competition for you guys. The first person who gives me a review on iTunes gets a free half-hour mentoring session with me, where we can sort of touch base with some of the challenges, some of the ideas that you have, whether that is part of your career, part of sort of investments, or maybe it's about this, or maybe it's self-development. So the first person from tonight, when this gets released, that puts a review on iTunes will receive a 30-minute investment in your time and investing in you. So look out for that. I'll be keeping an eye out for that, and then we can arrange that. We can then direct message some way, and we can arrange that. So that is for everyone. Just a couple of bits of feedback about last week's podcast. That was to do with no regrets and being what you're going to be remembered for. A comment that came through was that they really felt that the no regrets bit was massive, and that made a big impact on this particular person. I'm so pleased that you're finding that helpful. That whole idea of just living life for today, then just making sure you act do it. Get out there, meet people, deliver to people, services, products, whatever it is. Get out there and do that. So thank you so much for those comments on having no regrets. I do think that's a massive thing for people, and what I'd hate for you to do is be listening to this and use this as just as entertainment. This should be inspiring you to be able to get out there and do more and be a better you. So I would definitely say, really think about this week. Obviously think about the investments, and any comments, thoughts, ideas you've got about that, I would welcome it. But just think about that whole no regrets piece. Opportunities are there, they will always be there, and so just grab them and always start moving forward. All right, guys, that's the end of the podcast. I thank you very much for listening, and I will speak to you soon.